BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Just dropping a couple of announcements first. The first thing that I would like to say is we will be continuing our Zodiac book discussion on Robert Graysmith and Zodiac Unmasked later this week, but we do have a few things coming out, and one of the things that came to my attention was we did a Q&A for the month of March back in earlier this year in 2020, but it's almost the end of April, and we hadn't done a recent Q&A where I read off your questions and comments, and we have a little bit of a discussion. We used to do these weekly in the past, and then I remembered that I thought, okay, maybe weekly is a little bit much now as the topic lists gets bigger and bigger, but we can even do it monthly. So I thought this would be a very good opportunity to talk about some of the things that you guys have been saying about the Zodiac Killer. And in the past, we did this with all other subjects, talking about the disappearance of Maura Murray, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, Brandon Lawson, many high-profile cases, as well as even O.J. Simpson. So we are going to... but I did say we have announcements, and I do have another thing to say, actually. I found this video that somebody sent me. It was from Evan from Texas. That's the name of his YouTube channel. He left a comment on our upload, Zodiac Killer Hoax Debate, and he made a very well-done presentation on the Zodiac Killer hoax theory and Thomas Henry Horan. I will include a link to his upload here in the description box. I think that it's very good because he actually has all of the primary source documents available on the screen. It's done in kind of the presentation slideshow format where he's narrating it, but he also has all of the pictures and images of the case file documents right on the screen, talking about the Zodiac Killer hoax theory and his stance on that. Very good presentation, and I just think that we've mentioned Thomas Henry Horan and the Great Zodiac Killer hoax a lot, so I just would like to include a link to his presentation, and feel free to check out his YouTube channel, Evan from Texas. Nice work. So, moving on today to our Q&A, I'm going to go over here, and we're going to be looking at an upload that came in from YouTube user TM. I believe that his name is Travis. If we're going to be talking about promoting Evan's video, we also have this one from TM, and he is the guy that runs the Lawrence Kane WordPress, available at lawrencekane.wordpress.com, chronicling some things in the life and times of Lawrence Kane. Lawrence Kane is a very fascinating Zodiac Killer suspect, and I think that perhaps he almost has the personality type that could be involved with this. I said perhaps because there are a few big complications with Lawrence Kane as a Zodiac Killer suspect, but I asked TM who he believed was involved, and he responded to me, "Who do you believe was involved? Of the named suspects, the one who most merits additional scrutiny, to my mind at least, is Darwin Farrell Jenkins. He was an ex-airman who lived in Vallejo and had a history of accosting young couples in secluded lovers' lanes. According to a report filed with the Vallejo Police Department, a small excerpt of which can be viewed at Michael Butterfield's site, ZodiacKillerFacts.com, and he has a link here that is posted. Some of the verbiage he employed during these incidents was strikingly similar to the escaped prisoner ruse utilized by the Zodiac at Lake Berryessa. That, of course, is talking about, I just escaped from Deer Lodge, Montana, a prison in Deer Lodge, Montana, rather, and I'm now en route to Mexico. I need money. A lot of people interpret that as simply the person who was wearing that hood at Lake Berryessa was saying those things just to get a desired response from Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, the two victims that were stabbed. He made up that story, I escaped from Deer Lodge, Montana, and I'm going to Mexico, because he thought that would make them comply with his verbal commands. That's been discussed by many people. And even Gary Stewart wrote that in the book, The Most Dangerous Animal of All, a book that I don't speak too highly of, which we did a discussion about on this channel. But I would say that this is kind of providing a little bit of a motivation for that, talking about the escaped prisoner thing. And what I can say, though, is it's very interesting that he noted that this guy, Darwin Farrell Jenkins, was an airman. And I have to be very, very honest with you. I have never heard of him prior to reading this comment when TM left it on my Lawrence Kane upload. I will look into the Zodiac Killer suspect, but what I can say is that airmen come up very frequently. And I don't have the comment in front of me, but it came to us from Jamie Hendrickson, who's a great Zodiac researcher. He has left some brilliant comments on a lot of the uploads here on this channel. And he was talking about the radian theory from Gareth Penn, saying that sailors and airmen, like pilots, would be familiar with radians. The whole thing, put a radian on top of Mount Diablo, 57.29 degrees, 57.3 degrees, and then one line goes to the Blue Rock Springs Park, and another line goes to the incident in Presidio Heights, Washington, and Cherry Street, thereabouts, and it's the angle of 57.3 degrees. If it's placed on Mount Diablo, then this angle will line up with these two things, and then supposedly Lake Berryessa is equidistant. Well, Lake Berryessa is in the middle of the radian, and that is equidistant from Travis Air Force Base. So a lot of people think that there is a very big clue with the Air Force, but then Thomas Henry Horn would just say that this is all part of the Zodiac Killer hoax theory because his suspect for writing the letters was Hal Snook, who was in the Air Force. Okay, but thank you to TM for that comment there. And we're just going to really explore that Air Force connection because when we were doing our uploads on Gareth Penn, like, that was something that Gareth Penn really wanted to talk about in his book, Time 17, the possibility that this had something to do with somebody from the Air Force, an airman, a pilot, that's the kind of pathway that you were supposed to go down. And prior to the interview that I did with Thomas Horn on this channel, one of the things that he had told me was, like, that he had told me personally, was just that Gareth Penn was going down the right pathway. So, and I mean, you would have to say that because the radian on top of Mount Diablo, like, that was meant to be significant. But our next comment is going to be coming into us from David Xiao, C-I-A-O. Is it Xiao or Chow, David? How do you say that? And David's comment is, was Hal Snook upset about not receiving medals? I can speak to that. Many try to avoid that as an unnecessary aspect of military service. Does anybody actually think that a person with a lot of ribbons and an immaculate uniform at all times is doing anything at all? Question mark. It is nice to be acknowledged every now and then, but usually as a pat on the back and extra ice cream on a hot day would do just fine. I think that is why the writer of the Zodiac letters was being sarcastic and taunting, but if it was Hal Snook and he had that sort of mentality, then I can see that side as well. Okay, thank you, David, for that comment there. What he's talking about is, one of the claims of Thomas Henry Horn is that the Zodiac letters, the original one, like the first set that came out, were mailed 25 years to the day of when Hal Snook should have received his Bronze Stars and his Purple Heart. He was a World War II veteran. Hal Snook, of course, the suspect that Thomas Horn has for the writer of the Zodiac letters. And one of the things we got to say, though, about Hal Snook is that's a coincidence that I cannot ignore. If that is all lining up and that is all true, that is just something that you cannot ignore. That's something that Horn says that he believes, that Hal Snook was very bitter about not getting his World War II medals. And, I would be, absolutely. And I think that's what David was trying to say, like, anybody who had some type of, awards or accomplishments like that, and Hal Snook was very passionate about it. And in that presentation that we mentioned from Evan from Texas, one of the things he was saying about Hal Snook is just like, he was just such a highly decorated narcotics officer. He had so many certificates, he had so many accomplishments, and during the interview with Thomas Horn, he even said that Hal Snook had to be the big fish in the small pond. He was very, very focused on domination, as well as just trying to do everything. That's what I hear about when I hear people talking about Hal Snook. It's like, he was an investigator, he was a forensic scientist, he was a professor at Napa Valley Junior College where he met Dennis Land, he was the owner of a sporting goods store, and of course all of the stuff that he did in the Air Force with codes, and it just seems like he had to be somebody who was just trying to excel at everything that he did, from the sources that I've heard there. So yes, absolutely, I would think that there might be some connection there. But some people have left some other comments on the other uploads that we've done about Thomas Horn and the Zodiac Killer hoax theory. They're like, all right, I can accept that Hal Snook might have had something to do with this, but to say that the reason why he created the Zodiac Killer persona is first and foremost, okay, he's bitter about not getting his World War II medals, but then he's using the Zodiac ciphers as a way to send coded messages to a CIA operative in Southeast Asia to monitor shipments of tainted heroin. It's like, whoa, like, like, where are you going with this? Like, this is just exploding into something. And, we would just have to take that for what you will. And like, that is one of the things though, just like, I really noticed that with Thomas Henry Horn. He doesn't simply just say that Hal Snook wrote the letters and this is how the events took place. What he says to the contrary is that, this builds up and it could be involving the CIA and it could be involving the drug lords and just countless other things get tied into that. And I think those are some of the things that people really have a lot of trouble accepting. But, it's an outrageous theory. Absolutely. The Zodiac Killer hoax theory, which isn't a genuine hoax, as we said. It takes on a life of its own after July of 1969, and it becomes a real incident of, Zodiac activity. But it's just something to think about. Now, we are going to go on here to our next comment, and that is going to be coming to us from YouTube user Postmark. One thing we keep noticing in the Zodiac case is inconsistency. There is inconsistency in the Zodiac's MO, his use of weapons, choice of victims, the time of day, the location of the attacks, and certain aspects of his crimes remain inconsistent. It is natural for investigators to try and identify a hidden pattern. I think, however, some are seeing patterns where none exist. And this ties into another thing, though, that we put out on our most recent Zodiac Killer upload called Podcast Promotion, where I was just talking about some of the other links that we have available on this channel. And I believe that one came from Postmark as well. That's why I wanted to read off one of the other comments, because it says, so glad you mentioned this, because one of the examples that Horan says that this is done to how Thomas Horan got onto the subject about how there was no Zodiac Killer, or that this was actually Hal Snook writing the letters, trying to link it all together, comes from the possibility that we discussed in this most recent upload, saying that he has a line where he says there's information that only the killer could have known, and there's information that was in the letters that the killer could not have known. And what he is talking about was somebody was seen leaving the scene at Blue Rock Springs Park. I incorrectly said Lake Herman Road last time. Blue Rock Springs Park on the 4th of July. They drove in. They're like, oh crap, I saw a crime scene. And, they just drove out of there very calmly, though, not to draw attention to themselves. And that was mentioned in the police report. And the first name of the person doing that was Andy. And the thing to say about that is, let's just kind of read off Postmark's comment. So glad you mentioned this, because it was one of the few examples where Horan gives in his podcast interviews as to why the letter writer must have had access to the police reports, and I always found it unconvincing. It doesn't rule out the possibility that the killer did drive away slowly. It's not unheard of to have two slow drivers that night. And that's exactly what we were talking about. I was like, wait a second, that provides 0 pieces of precise information. I left slowly and quietly. That presents 0 pieces of precise information. Precise and specific information would be, oh, I left slowly and quietly while driving a white car with purple rims and some fuzzy dice hanging off the look-around. And if there actually had been a car that was driving slowly and quietly that was white and had purple rims and fuzzy dice hanging off the look-around, that would be specific and precise information. Something that is so vague. And when we talked about patterns, I wanted to put those things together, because the real argument against the Zodiac hoax theory is just this is turning into a giant vast conspiracy. And what you could say to that would be quite simple. You would just be like, hey, wait a second, did this guy just see this possibility and then start forcing a pattern onto the situation? But, remember what I did say about Hal Snook, his medals, and the dates of receiving the medals and the dates of receiving or dates of mailing out the Zodiac letters, rather. I want to be very clear. I can't say that Thomas Henry Horan is wrong. Absolutely not. If everything is true, and it happened the way he said it happened, all right, more power to him. But it's a big observation, though. That whole concept of this is information that only the police report had that the killer couldn't possibly have known. I don't. I'm in agreement with that comment there. That is not precise information. But I would be quite curious to know what other people would have to say about something like that there. And, we can always just try and expand upon some of these things and look at them from a different angle. And this is one of the reasons that why we can do these things in the far off corner of YouTube. But because we did our 6-part discussion about Gareth Penn and his book Time 17, I'd like to pull up another one from that. And this is coming to us from Michael McJenkins. How could he have the method of radiance all laid out, and yet the cops and the FBI would not have known about what that was? I mean, that is pretty obvious. It is a pretty obvious reference in that one letter, and it seems to me that it could have been looked into by someone, or there would have been someone hired, at least, that had been asked about it. Or a reference from a library. Maybe the last was avoided due to the much previous Riverside case. I do know something. It makes little sense to convert letters to numbers and then turn around and say that the numbers convert to the very same letters you started with. That is silly. Well, very bold comment there from Michael, but I mean, the reason why, like, I just found this stands out to you a little bit when you read it out loud, because you really just have to look at Gareth Penn and his entire book. I mean, some other people were leaving some comments. Was it on this one as well? And they're just like, hey, this guy's just stretching the truth, more or less. And that's why we really devoted only the first part of Time 17 to a book discussion, because that's all I really had to say. I mean, he's using the same formula over and over again. When the book was uploaded online, it was divided into 4 parts, and we did the book discussion on part 1. There are 6 episodes we've done on Gareth Penn and Time 17, and in the first part of the book, that's all he did. He's like, okay, we can convert words into Morse code, then to binary, and we can take their numerical value and we can rearrange them around in certain mathematical clues, and it's very entertaining for a little while, but then it's just like, I don't have much else to say about that. But about Michael's comment, what do we do with the concept of a radian? And Gareth Penn simply said 99% of people who do not 99% of people do not have the word radian in their vocabulary, and even if they did, they wouldn't use it in something like a letter. But if you ever check out that channel, Zodiac Killer Insights, you'll see a variety of mathematical clues that are included in the Zodiac letters. The Zodiac seem to have a good familiarity with numbers. Would that be somebody like Hal Snook from the Air Force? Or would that be somebody like, as we just laid out with the suspect that TM was talking about? And what would you really want to say about somebody like that? I mean, why didn't people catch on to the radiant thing sooner? I mean, what Gareth Penn wrote in the book, Time 17, was simply, they're just like, what's a radian? And then they forgot about it, and they just didn't bother looking into it. And I believe Gareth Penn was talking to Ken Narlow, but don't quote me on that, because I'm just going off of memory, don't have the book in front of me right now. And he's like, I was wondering for 10 years, what is a radian? Gareth Penn's answer to this question is simply, no one bothered to look it up. And then once he discovered the radian, and it was Gareth Penn with a little bit of aid from his father, actually, Gareth Penn was just like, holy crap, I figured out something that only the killer had previously known, and now it's like, I'm going down the right pathway. So, what do we make of that? Why didn't somebody look into this more? Why didn't somebody, some way, somehow, all the FBI people looking at the letter, not think to look about what is a radian? It's possible something like that could be overlooked. I mean, maybe just no one wanted to make a trip out to the library and just ask someone what a radian is. Obviously, right now we can just Google things. Didn't have the internet back then, but I mean, it's a fair question, because that would also mean that maybe Gareth Penn is, do I want to say it? No, I don't, but he's reading too much into it. And a lot of these people who have Zodiac theories are perhaps forcing a pattern onto the subject. And they are talking about things that they might believe are true, but, we all do this. We try to make sense of events by linking them all together, and I'm not 100% sure if everything in the Zodiac hoax theory is correct. I mean, most of us are not. I'm also not 100% sure that everything some other Zodiac researchers have thrown out is correct. What I can say is that a lot of this really relies on us as the audience connecting the dots and putting it all together. What do you have to say about anything we've mentioned in this upload here? If you like this upload, you can hit the like button, and if you haven't subscribed yet, you're welcome to do so. But most importantly, please drop some comments below. Until next time.